Trump's been taking a lot of flack from this, of course, from Democrats, people like the Bidens, the Obamas, and even the Clintons. And Bill actually was just talking about this in a recent interview. I want to get your thoughts about this clip because he said something that is just crazy to me, and I have to get your thoughts, so let's roll this clip.
There's this book that came out that talks about Joe Biden and the people around him seeing that he had cognitive and physical decline. Did you ever have a moment with him where you thought maybe he was unfit to run for president? No.
I thought he was a good president. President Trump has a right to do what he thinks is right. He's doing it. The courts are doing their jobs. There will be other elections. But someone needs to stand up and say, damn it, what we have in common matters more. We cannot throw the legacy of this country away. We cannot destroy other people's trust in us. We need to preserve that and find a way to work together and not humiliate other people just so we can win. We got to just calm down and try to pull people together again. That's what I think.
Coming from the party that has called this guy a white supremacist and a racist and a xenophobe and a sexist, and they've literally set the stage for an assassination attempt against him. Welcome back to The Real Story. I'm your host, Riley Lewis. Thank you for joining us. An economist is an expert who will know tomorrow why the things he predicted yesterday didn't happen today. This insightful and brilliant observation, attributed to the Canadian educator Lawrence Peter, who's widely known for having introduced an idea called the Peter Principle, is timeless. And it certainly applies to the current analyses of tariffs and trade, and the trade war itself. Ever since President Trump started introducing tariffs on imports from countries all over the world, several economists and organizations that study economy-related issues have predicted price hikes, major supply chain disruptions, and even economic downturn. It's been one doom and gloom prediction after another every single day for not weeks, but months. But here's the real kicker. The mainstream narrative seems to be at odds with reality once again. And yes, things could certainly change. And everyone can accept that fact because it's the nature of life itself. However, as of right now, the Trump administration's economic policies are working wonders. And nobody in the legacy media establishment seems to be capable of admitting it. But just think about it for a moment. While they push fear about all the things that could happen as a result of President Trump's economic agenda, what's actually happening in reality is quite profound. Prices are falling. Inflation is falling. Consumer confidence is increasing. And despite what the legacy media claimed would happen by introducing tariffs on countries all over the planet, including strategic U.S. allies, heads of state across the globe have come to the Trump administration in order to make new trade deals. Instead of running away from Washington, D.C., which is exactly what the legacy media said would happen, they ran toward Washington, D.C., because they understand the fundamental value of doing business in the U.S. market. And that brings us to a brand new economic forecast from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, an international body with 38 member states. This new report claims U.S. economic growth could slow, again, could slow, to 1.6% in 2025 and then 1.5% in 2026, marking a steep downturn from the growth of 2.8% seen last year. And they cite new tariffs as the reason behind their forecast. And while they don't mention President Trump in the projection specifically, they do go after those tariff policies. In fact, they claim these tariffs, which have bumped the effective U.S. import rate to 15.4%, the highest since 1938, are driving up costs and once again could spike inflation up to 3.9% by the end of 2026. The operative word there being could. This is all hypothetical, okay? And by the way, where were reports like this one when the Biden-Harris administration gave Americans the highest inflation rate they've seen in 40 years? Where was all the doom and gloom about financial catastrophe back then? Let that sink in. It clearly goes to show that they're very biased in their coverage, and they're giving away the game. However, speaking of tariffs, tomorrow is a very big deadline for countries that are actively looking to avoid the brand new duties on aluminum and steel. According to a draft letter from the U.S. Trade Representative that was reviewed by Reuters, the Trump White House is set to raise tariffs on both aluminum and steel imports from 25% to 50% effective tomorrow. And they're currently pushing nations like Japan, India, Vietnam, and even the European Union to submit their best trade offers by Wednesday, so tomorrow, to get around them. And reportedly, the move is designed to accelerate trade negotiations, not isolate foreign countries, especially before the pause on Trump's Liberation Day tariffs is expected to expire on July 8th. That gives them about 5 weeks or so to make a deal or, conversely, live with the consequences. The choice is theirs. What's more, the draft letter makes one thing abundantly clear. These tariffs aren't going anywhere, regardless of court rulings that challenge them. That's why the draft letter asks for detailed proposals on tariffs, quotas, and non-tariff barriers, with the U.S. promising to evaluate responses quickly and propose what they call a landing zone for some deals. Now, it's unclear as of now what deals might be made in the coming days, but the letter itself shows that President Trump will use every tool at his disposal to secure better deals for Americans and protect American industries, all while also seeking to maintain relationships with America's most important trade partners. Here with reaction is Tom Jordan, the founder of SpokenPodcasts.com. Tom, my friend, thank you for being here.
Riley, it's so good to be back with you. Thank you so much.
So I have to get your thoughts because every single day there's new headlines, new reporting, it's fear-mongering and propaganda pushing, and the agenda is just so obvious, but I genuinely want to know, where was all of this coverage when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris literally ran the economy into the ground?
It wasn't there. And I don't know why I'm still surprised by this, but I thought, this is fantastic news, what we saw happen in the month of May. And you're not hearing the media covering the fact that there was a $23 billion tariff windfall, something that Newsweek, to their credit, did cover, but they wrote in it as very surprising. And I thought this is exactly what the Trump administration was saying was going to happen as a result of these tariffs. And I've been in support of these since prior to this new administration, prior to the election in past November. But it was nearly tripled from last year, and it demonstrates, it should, to the American people that tariffs, far from being punitive or symbolic or a tax increase somehow, it really is a viable revenue generator, just as Donald Trump said way back in 2018, and as he was saying on the campaign trail, much to the pushback of the news media. So you're better. I guess the reason why I have this more, I would say, objective perspective of it, but also positive viewpoint of tariffs is because I don't listen to the likes of Margaret Brennan from CBS, who are amplifying these hypotheticals, but while ignoring the real-time data that is coming in, that actually this is really good for this nation, for the United States. It may not be good for all those member nations in the OECD and elsewhere because they've really loved living high off the hog for the past several decades. Yeah. And so this is finally, it's like, okay, the chickens are coming home to roost. Yep. It's time that we started generating revenue through these tariffs, and that's exactly what's happening.
So whether or not the tariffs are ultimately the good strategy, it depends on what your end goal is, but the thing that really matters most to me is having an American president fight for his voters, for his constituents. Trump said this on the campaign trail before November, and it really stuck with me. This country, it doesn't belong to politicians. It doesn't belong to corporations. It doesn't belong to people who come here illegally. It doesn't belong to Vladimir Zelensky. It belongs to the American people, U.S. citizens, the people who built this country. So I think what I really appreciate here at the end of the day is just the mindset of having a president who's finally drawing a line in the sand and saying, we're not going to sell out the American people anymore. We'll see what happens with these deals, but I also suspect that this is a negotiation tactic, and it's been very effective thus far. Look at the pause with China, look at the deal with the UK. They said this would be isolating and divisive on the world stage, but it's actually brought a lot of people to the table, and I think that's really the end goal. So say what you will, but it's been a pretty effective strategy thus far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look behind me, you'll see I'm in Metro Detroit, and of course, Detroit is known as the auto manufacturer of the world. And for so long, in fact, behind me, that's that giant building. That is the world headquarters for General Motors. And for decades, they've been complaining about, previously NAFTA and the globalism and their manufacturing plants having to move overseas. And that was a direct result of these unfair tariffs. Tariffs are now leveling the playing field for these U.S. producers who've been undercut for decades by foreign subsidies, forced labor, currency manipulation. The currency manipulation is what I mean. And these industries that were previously being outsourced to China and elsewhere, they're now reconsidering reshoring to the United States, which of course bolsters domestic job creation. And we got a jobs report coming out on Friday, and I know a lot of people are just unwilling to admit that, hey, I don't like Donald Trump, so I'm not going to admit that this tariff plan might actually be working.
Yeah, well, if that's really it, that would be so sad. Putting ideology and your partisan agenda above real results and what's perfectly obvious is just so disturbing, Tom. But I do want to pivot to something else I've seen, because Trump's been taking a lot of flack from this, of course, from Democrats, people like the Bidens, the Obamas, and even the Clintons. And Bill actually was just talking about this in a recent interview. I want to get your thoughts about this clip because he said something that is just crazy to me, and I have to get your thoughts. So let's roll this clip.
There's this book that came out that talks about Joe Biden and the people around him seeing that he had cognitive and physical decline. Did you ever have a moment with him where you thought maybe he was unfit to run for president? No.
I thought he was a good president. President Trump has a right to do what he thinks is right. He's doing it. The courts are doing their jobs. There will be other elections. But someone needs to stand up and say, damn it, what we have in common matters more. We cannot throw the legacy of this country away. We cannot destroy other people's trust in us. We need to preserve that and find a way to work together and not humiliate other people just so we can win. We got to just calm down and try to pull people together again. That's what I think.
I just, coming from the party that has called this guy a white supremacist and a racist and a xenophobe and a sexist, and they've literally set the stage for an assassination attempt against him just to turn around and say we need more unity. Tom, take it from here, please.
Yeah, the unity. We have to have global unity is what he's saying. Global unity over the fact that this country maybe needs to succeed on its own without dependence upon other nations like China and, elsewhere.
Thank you.
I don't know, Riley. I've been called, biased when it comes to my political opinion at times. So I've really tried to put on my more objective lenses here and listen to what Bill Clinton said and try to see his perspective. And I can't. I can't see it. I don't see any truth in what he just said, and I've looked hard at it, and it's not there. I don't think right now Bill Clinton himself even believes that what Donald Trump is doing is throwing away the legacy of this country, as if Joe Biden didn't torch it already. I mean, he talks about legacy, Bill Clinton does, but under Biden, we saw record high inflation,
we did.
Open border chaos. We saw international humiliation in Afghanistan.
Yes.
We saw a weaponized federal agencies, bureaucracy targeting political opponents. If anybody torched public trust, it's the administration that told Americans that inflation was transitory, and while they watched their savings disappear and allowed foreign entities like China and Iran to take hold, and North Korea, and to increase in their power structures. So I don't know. I think safety, security, prosperity is more important than unifying with the likes of Iran and China.
Well, and he's asking, Bill Clinton's basically saying Trump and his base should unify with people that are, enacting political violence against them and firebombing Teslas and just, mass murdering people in the streets like what we saw in Colorado. So it's hard for me to empathize with that perspective, but here's what I will end on. If we want to heal this deeply divided country, then we have to be able to have honest and rational conversations about what's in America's best interests. Maybe tariffs are in our best interests, maybe not. I'm open to all sorts of arguments about that, but we have to at least be able to talk about these issues without the media's hysteria, because otherwise we're not going to heal this country anytime soon. So just final 30 seconds for you, Tom. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. I'm not beholden to any particular policy if it's not working. And I think we need to be very objective and honest, to have intellectual honesty as well, and have those types of dialogues. But if you believe that tariffs are working and that somehow makes you a bad person and somehow evil because you want the people within this country to succeed and not to be, left in poverty and not be able to afford eggs, which I just bought 2 dozen last night. And I called my wife and said, I can't believe how cheap eggs are right now. They weren't like that a couple months ago. Gas is down too. And I thought, this is wonderful because it helps people like you and me. I think I'm the definition of middle class, succeed and not be oppressed by non-transitory inflationary pressures.
Yeah.
So I think that you're right. Let's just get away from the rhetoric, stop listening to people now, unfortunately, like Bill Clinton, and just pay attention to the data and listen to guys like Riley Lewis, because he'll tell you the truth.
Yeah, well, look, I appreciate it. I'm doing my best here, but it's maddening. So just thank you for being one of the people who's out there, who's actually having these rational conversations about what's best for Americans. Not the politicians, not the lobbyists, not illegal immigrants, but the citizens who actually live here and work here and who've built this country. So just thank you for your time today, Tom.
Right back at you, Riley. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Looking for news that actually tells the truth, not just the headlines they want you to hear? Then it's time to sign up for OAN Live. It's your go-to source for unfiltered news, sharp debate, and 5 hard-hitting political talk shows, including my show, Real America with Dan Ball. You can watch live anytime, anywhere. No noise, no nonsense, just real reporting and bold conversations that matter to you and your family. You can sign up for OAN Live now to see the truth unfold, and you can catch Real America every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern. Just go to live.onn.com. Again, that's live.onn.com and sign up today and start watching every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern.